The Crusades, the battle. The Crusades, the battle for the Holy Land and a bloody legacy. Part 1. Introduction. The Call from Clermont. Welcome back to the channel. The year is 1095. In a field in Clermont, France, Pope Urban II delivers a speech that will forever alter the course of human history. With two words, Deus vult, or God wills it, he ignites a fire that will burn for 200 years. Thousands of people, from elite knights in shining armor to illiterate peasants, abandoned their homes to march thousands of miles toward a city they had only seen in their dreams, Jerusalem. But the Crusades were never just about religion. They were a violent intersection of power, greed, salvation, and a profound misunderstanding between East and West. Who truly won after 2 centuries of bloodshed? And why do the scars of these ancient wars still throb in the politics of the modern world? Today, guided by the brilliant scholarship of Thomas Asbridge, we step onto the hallowed and blood-soaked ground of the Crusades. Part 2. Multi-dimensional perspectives beyond black and white. One of the greatest strengths of Thomas Asbridge's work is his refusal to paint history in simple colors. He shows us that in the Crusades, there was no good or bad side, only human beings driven by their own truths. A. The Frankish perspective, the Crusaders. To the West, this was a just war. Asbridge describes the terrifying reality of the First Crusade, not as a glorious parade, but as a journey of starvation, disease, and absolute fear. He humanizes these warriors, showing how intense religious zeal drove them to perform miracles of endurance at the siege of Antioch, but also how that same zeal led to the horrific massacre of civilians when they finally breached the walls of Jerusalem in 1099. B. The Muslim perspective, the defenders. For the first time in a mainstream historical account, we see that the Islamic world was not a unified empire. When the Crusaders arrived, the Middle East was fractured by the bitter rivalry between the Sunni Turks and the Shia Fatimids of Egypt. This internal division was the only reason the First Crusaders succeeded. Asbridge meticulously details how the Muslim world eventually found its voice, moving from shock and confusion to a unified jihad that would eventually reclaim every inch of the lost territory. Part 3. Legendary characters, the Lion and the Sultan. Every epic needs its heroes, and the Third Crusade provided 2 of the most iconic figures in history. Their rivalry is the beating heart of the Crusades' legend. Richard the Lionheart. He was the ultimate Western knight, brilliant in battle, a master of logistics, but also arrogant and capable of great cruelty. Richard was a king who spent more time on the battlefield than on his throne, driven by a desperate need for glory and the fulfillment of his crusading vow. Saladin. On the other side stood Saladin, the sultan who unified the Muslim world. He was a master statesman and a devout leader. What makes Saladin unique in history is the respect he commanded even from his enemies. When he retook Jerusalem in 1187, there was no massacre. He allowed the Christians to leave in peace. Key insight. Asbridge reveals that these 2 men didn't just fight with swords. They fought with honor, diplomacy, and mutual respect. They traded gifts and letters as often as they traded blows, proving that even in the darkest of wars, human connection is possible. Part 4. The Collapse and the Cultural Legacy. As the 13th century drew to a close, the Crusader states, known as Outre-mer, began to crumble. Why did they fail? Asbridge points to a simple reality. The West could not maintain a permanent military presence so far from home, while the Muslim world had finally achieved a unity that was impossible to break. The cultural bridge. However, the legacy of the Crusades wasn't just death. The Crusaders brought back more than just stories. They brought back Arabic knowledge in medicine, mathematics, and philosophy. They introduced Europe to spices, silk, and architectural techniques that would eventually help spark the Renaissance. The East, in many ways, civilized the West through this violent contact. The historical scar. But there is a dark side. Asbridge warns us about how modern extremists, on both sides, still use the word crusade to justify modern conflicts. By understanding the true history, we can strip away the propaganda and see the Crusades for what they were, a tragic, epic struggle that shaped the modern borders of our minds. Part 5. Conclusion and the grand finale of the series. Thomas Asbridge's The Crusades teaches us that history is not for judging, it is for understanding. It shows us that while faith can move mountains, it can also burn cities. The 21-book series wrap-up. And here we are, at the final destination. This concludes our journey through 21 extraordinary books. Over this series, we have traveled across every possible landscape of human thought. We've decoded the aggressive business tactics of Alex Hormozy and the marketing genius of Steve Jobs. We've investigated the dark financial ruins of Enron and the psychological mazes of Stephen King. We've felt the heartbreak in James McBride's memoirs, explored the dystopian futures of Neil Shusterman, and finally, stood on the ancient battlefields of the Crusades. These 21 books have given us a portable library of wisdom. We've learned about greed, love, power, resilience, and the eternal search for identity. Whether it was a modern thriller or an ancient history, the lesson is the same. The more we read, the more we understand that every human story is connected. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for joining me on this 21-book odyssey. Your support, your comments, and your hunger for knowledge are what make this channel a community. Before we close this chapter, I want to ask, which of these 21 books was your absolute favorite? Which one changed your life? And what topic should we dive into next? Let me know in the comments below. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. This series is over, but the pursuit of knowledge never ends. Until the next journey starts, stay curious, stay brave, and keep reading. Goodbye.